Hey, welcome to another video. In this video, we're gonna get started on the dealership level. We're gonna be creating game mode, player controller, and then we're also gonna be creating the widgets. And hopefully, if the video is not too long, we're gonna create all the appearance of the widgets. And then in the next video, we are going to add functionality to those widgets. With that, let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to select in the main menu level, we're going to select the camera actor, the plane, and the rect light. We're just going to copy these over to the dealership level. So with them selected, we're going to Control C, and then we're going to open up the dealership level. And then in the window, left click, and then Control V. And then if we just zoom out, we have the assets carried over. And then we're going to go to the content, blueprints, and then we're going to right click blueprint class, and then we'll select game mode base, and then this one is going to be GM dealership, and then we're going to right click again, blueprint class, and then we're going to select the player controller, and then this is going to be the PC dealership. And then in the world settings, just must select that, deselect everything just by randomly clicking in some interface. And then by the game mode override, we're going to select the GM dealership, and then in the player controller class, we're going to select the PC dealership. And then we're going to save everything. And then we're going to open up the PC dealership, head over to the event graph, and then just dock this to the top. And then on the event begin play, we are going to right click and then get game instance, drag off, and then cost to BPGI game, connect the execution pin, drag off from the as BPGI game, promote variable, and then hold S and left click, create a sequence, and then we're going to drag off from the then one, and then get all actors of class. And we're going to select the camera actor, and then from the out actors, drag off promote variable, and then we're going to call this cameras, and then we're going to go from the then one, drag off, and then set view target with blend, and then from the target, drag off, and then look for self, get reference to self, and then in the new blend target, we're going to drag in the cameras, hold control, drag it in, and then get a copy, and then connect it to the new target, and then we're going to drag off from the set view target blend, drag off, and then, oh no, first we need to create the widget. So let's go create the widget in the dealership level, content, widgets, dealership, and then in here we're gonna right click, head down to user interface, and then we're gonna select the widget blueprint, and then user widget, and then there's gonna be WBP underscore dealership, and then we're gonna Control D, and then the next widget to be duplicated, we're gonna call this vehicle button, then Control D again, and then this one's gonna be purchase pop-up, and then Control D, and then the last one we're going to call this one the vehicle info. So we can open up all the widgets, and then we're going to save all, head back to the player controller, and then now from the set view target with blend, drag off, and then create widget, and then the widget we are going to create is the dealership, and then we're going to drag off from the return value, and then add to viewport. Oh, one thing I did forget to do is here at the beginning, before we do the cost to the game instance, just drag off, and then what we're going to look for is set show mouse cursor to true. Okay, I forgot to do that. And then we are going to drag off from the create widget, and then we're gonna set input mode UI only, and then connect the execution pin, and then just add a redirect node, just tidy this up a bit, and then from the player controller, drag off, and then look for self, get reference to self, and then that will be it. You can compile, save, close the player controller, and then just make sure here, and then to see if it works, we're just gonna go into the dealership quickly, and then let's just add a canvas panel real quick. And then on the canvas panel, we're going to add a button just temporarily to see if the widget is being created. Compile, play the level. Okay, so there's the button. The widget is being created. Let's close that. And then now we're going to create the appearance of the widgets. The first one we're starting with is going to be the dealership. So let's just remove the button we created. The first thing we're going to add to the canvas is an overlay, and then select the overlay, head over to anchors, shift control, and then select the one in the bottom right so we can anchor it to the entire screen. And then the next one we're going to add is a text block. Add that to the overlay, and then select the text block. We're going to set it to the horizontal alignment to the right, and then we're going to add padding at the top 50, and then to the right 50, and then we're going to set the size to 32. And then for the content, we are quickly going to go to the graph, and then in the event construct, right click, get game instance, drag off, and then cross to BPGI game, and then from as BPGI game, drag off, and then promote to variable, and then that's going to be it. Back to the designer. Then for the text block, just compile. By the content, I'm going to create a binding, and then we're going to set it to the money. So that's it for the text block. And then the next thing we're going to add is a vertical box. Add that to the overlay, and then select the vertical box. We're going to align it to the bottom, and then the horizontal, we're going to set it to fill, and then we're going to add a bottom padding of 30 to it. And then the next thing we're going to add is a scroll box to the vertical box. Should actually parent the scroll box to the vertical box. And then with the scroll box selected, select it to is variable. We're going to change the name of the scroll box to be vehicles, and then we're going to set the horizontal alignment to fill, and then we're going to add some padding to the left 30, to the right 30, and then to the bottom 20. And then the next thing we're going to add is a size box. So add a size box to the vertical box, and then in the size box we're going to add a button, and then on the button we're going to add a text, and then the button we should set it to is variable, and we're going to call this button back. Change the text as well to back, and then we'll select the size box, and then override width and height. We're going to set it to 120 by 50, and then we're going to set the horizontal alignment to the left. Then we're going to add a padding on the left of 150, and then that will be it for the dealership level. So the scroll box we are going to fill with the vehicle button. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a for each loop, and then with that for each loop it's going to add a button for every car that is in the BPS vehicle. So every car that's in the blueprint structure will receive its own button when the code is run. So we're going to compile and then save, and then the next thing we're going to do is the vehicle button. And then in here what we're going to do is we're going to set the full screen to desired on screen, and then we're going to select a button, drop that on the WBP vehicle because we don't need a canvas for this. And then actually we need to wrap this in a size box as well, and then the size box override width, override height, and then the width is 28, the height is 162, and then depending on whether you are going to display the car's name or the car's image, we're going to need either one. For me, I chose to display the car's name, so I need a text block on the button. If you're going to use the car's image, then what you would need is an image, and then you place that on the button, and then the process pretty much follows the same. So you're going to select the text block or the image, whichever is in your case, and then you're going to set it to is variable. And then to make things easier, you can rename the button. I'm going to rename it, I'm going to call it vehicle button, and then the text I'm going to rename it to vehicle name, and then I'm going to increase the size to maybe, I think 42 will be fine. So that does it for the vehicle button. I'm going to compile, and then the next one we're going to do is the purchase pop-up, and then in here we are going to add a canvas panel, and then on the canvas panel we're going to add an overlay, and then select the overlay, anchors, shift control, anchor it to the entire screen, and then we're going to select a vertical box first, select that on the overlay, select the vertical box, and then we're going to align it to the center, and then we are going to add a text to the vertical box, and then select the text, Control D to duplicate it, and then the vertical box, set it to is variable, and then I'm going to call this the vehicle pop-up, and then actually the horizontal alignment we need to set it to full, And then we're also going to add a padding on the left and on the right of 100 on each side, and then select the text and then align them to the center. And then the top text, change the text to purchase for, and then ellipses, and then the text at the bottom, we are going to also set this to is variable, and then we're going to change the name to vehicle price. So this text block is going to change dynamically based on the vehicle that has been selected. So whenever you click the button, this pop-up will then show up, and then it will say purchase for, and then the price of the vehicle, and then you're going to add two buttons that will either be yes or no. And then if you select yes, that will become your current vehicle to drive around in, and then you'll be transported over to the open world. And then if you select no, this widget will then be destroyed, and then you'll go back into the dealership level to then select another car. So we're going to do that now. We're going to add the buttons. So add the button to the vertical box, and then we're going to duplicate it, and then we're going to select a text block, and then add a text block to each of the buttons. Set each button to a variable. The top button, I'm going to rename this to yes. Change the text also to yes, and then the lower button is variable, change it to no, and then set the text as well to no, and then we're going to add some spacing to all this. So select the buttons and then add a padding of 20, and then you can select the bottom button if the padding is too much. You can then set this to 0. Actually no, not 0. Okay, so it's left 20, right 20, and then bottom 20. So the top one needs to be set to 0 so that it looks uniform. Or you can select the button and then select the bottom one, set this to 10, and then select the other button, set the top to 10, and then you get the same result. And then the purchase for, we're going to change the size, make it a little bigger, maybe 56, and then add this one with a bottom padding of 10, and then this text block, you can also change edge size, we'll make it 36, just make it a little bit bigger, and then I'm going to add another text block to the overlay, not part of the vertical, and then select this one, and then we're going to set its horizontal and vertical alignment to the center. We're going to change it to say 42, and then we're going to set this to its variable, and then change each name to owned, and then change the content as well to owned. So this text will only pop up when the player already owns the selected vehicle. When you select the car, then instead of the vehicle pop-up appearing, it will then instead pop up this text block that says you already own the car. It will be on screen for maybe a couple seconds and then disappear again, allowing you, the player, then to move on and try to purchase a different car instead. With that, we are done with the vehicle pop-up widget. So we're going to compile, save, and then the last one we're going to do is the vehicle info. In here, we are yet again going to add a canvas panel, and then we're going to add a border. Actually, before the border, we need to add an overlay. Select the overlay, anchors, shift control, anchor to entire screen, and then we're going to add the border to the overlay, and then on the border we are going to add a vertical box. Actually, not a vertical box, my mistake, it's a horizontal box. And then we're going to select the border, and then we are going to add some padding to it. On the left, 50, to the top, 150, just to bring it down a bit. And then in the horizontal box, we then add the vertical box. So add 1, 2. And then in the vertical boxes, we are going to add text blocks. So the text blocks, well, can I add a text block? If you see the white background, it's because we haven't changed the border. So we're going to select the border. Then we're going to head over to the brush color. We're going to lower the color to like a black. And then we're going to lower the alpha to, we'll start off with a 0.5. We'll come and change this as needed later on. Going back to the text blocks. So the text blocks, need to correspond to whatever information that we want to display to the player about the car that the mouse cursor is currently hovered over. So if, say for example, you want to display the entire data asset about the car, so everything that you filled in on a data asset, then you need to have as many text blocks as the information that's in the data asset. And then if there are things you want to exclude, then only have as many text blocks as the information that you want to include. So for me, I'm going to have as many text blocks as the information in the data asset because I want to display all that to the player. So we're just gonna go and open up one of the data assets. Vehicle, select this one, and we'll just have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we need 9 text blocks. So just select all the text blocks. We have 1, 2, 3. Just Control D. Alright, so now I'm gonna select all the text blocks, and then we're gonna add a padding to each of them. Of 5, maybe 10. Okay, 10 will do. And then we're just going to rename all of these accordingly. So what do we have? First we have the max torque. So in the content text we have max torque, and then the next one is the engine. You don't have to have these in the exact same order as what they are in the data asset. You can arrange them however you want to. Then the next one is going to be max torque range. I'm just gonna fill all these in and then I'll come back afterwards. Okay, so now I have filled in the information. I ended up removing one of the text blocks because one of them is the vehicle name, and I don't need to display this by the vehicle info because that will be displayed on the button itself. So now I'm only left with 8. So what we're going to do now is select all the text blocks, select all of them, Control C, select the bottom vertical box, and then Control V. And then we pretty much have everything. And then what we're going to do is each one of these text blocks, we are now going to empty them because we don't actually need there to be information. Because similar to the button, the vehicle button, the information in these second text blocks will be filled in when the player actually hovers over the button. So whenever the player hovers over the button, the widget will then be dynamically updated to display whatever information about the car that is currently on the screen. So we need to empty out all these text blocks. So now we have all that done. And then now we need to select the text blocks again, set them to is variable, and then name them according to what they're going to display. So the top one for me is the max torque. The next one is variable is the engine, and then the next one is variable again. This is the max torque range. Next one is variable. This is the transmission. Next one is variable. This is the drivetrain. Next one is variable. This is the curb weight. Next one is variable, and then this is the top speed, and then the last one is variable, and then this is the price. Now the video is getting kind of long, but we want to do this last thing and then we are going to close out the video. Just compile, and then we're going to go to the event graph for the vehicle info, and then on the event construct we're going to drag in one of the variables here, drag it in, and then drag off, and then we'll look for set text. Then we're going to set text, and then connect this one. And now what we're going to do is let me just move this out of the way. So this is how we are going to dynamically update the widget. So by the in text, for now let's not do that. Let's just take all these, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we're gonna duplicate this a couple of times. We're gonna duplicate this as many times as the amount of variables that you have, and then we're just gonna drag and drop all of the variables over the other ones. And then for each of these set text, by the in text, drag off, come out to variable, and then this variable is the transmission text. and then we're going to set this to instance editable and then expose on spawn. And then we're going to do this for each of the other set text as well. Just drag off, promote to variable, name the variable. This is the top speed text, and then set it to instance editable and expose on spawn. So I'm going to do that for all the other ones and then come back once I'm done. Now that I'm done with the event construct, this is what it's meant to look like for each of the set text. It needs to have the variable and then the text variable as well. And then each one of these needs to be instance editable and then expose on spawn. And then that is the end of this video. And then in the next video, we are going to be adding the code to the other 3 widgets to finish off with the dealership. And then we're going to test it out and then see if everything works as intended. Until the next video.